record. Okay, here we go. So we are in the middle of a very, what's the word? A very detailed dissection of two particular verses in the book of Devarim, in the first chapter of Devarim. Let me get the Gemarrah up. Well, no, let's get the Psukim up first, and then we'll go back to the Gemarrah. Just to remind you, the Psukim that we are talking about are chapter 1, verses 16 to 18 of Devarim. And there it is on the screen for you now. And Leon will remind us, please, of the verses that the Gemarrah at the moment is really going to town on. And this is classical Gemarrah, by the way. This is real, if you like, bog standard Gemarrah, where they take Psukim and they go into it in great detail in order that we can learn as much as we can from each individual word. I need to you all, so I can only do that when I stop sharing. So I'm going to mute you all, and then you can unmute yourself. Leon, you unmute yourself now, please.
Yeah, I've done.
Okay. Right, we're back on with the Gemarrah. Okay, with the Psukim. So verses 16 to 18 is what we have started to get stuck into with this Gemarrah. And let's just remind ourselves of the verses that we're talking about.
I instructed your judges at that time, saying, listen among your brethren and judge righteously between a man and his brother or his litigant. You shall not show favoritism in judgment. Small and great alike shall you hear. You shall not tremble before any man, for the judgment is God's. Any matter that is too difficult for you, you shall bring to me, and I shall hear it. I commanded you at that time all the things that you should do.
Okay, now on the face of it, they are very simple, straightforward instructions from Moshe Rabbeinu to the judges, basically saying, be good boys and judge appropriately. And if we were just reading this sort of fairly superficially and not going into it in great detail, there's nothing really that jumps out at us from those psukim that says, oh, hang on a minute, that needs a bit of explanation. This just appears to be, to me at least, Moshe giving straightforward instruction to the people that he appointed as judges. But as you will see, well, we've already seen, the Gemarrah is not satisfied with that. It wants to go deeply into the psukim to analyze every single word and pull out as much as possible. And that is classical Talmud. It is what the Torah She'Ba'al Peh, the oral law, is. Because many of the things that we do and take for granted that are a part of our Torah are not to be found written explicitly in the Torah. They have to be deduced from the written Torah, and that deduction is the oral Torah, and that is what we are studying now. I know it isn't oral anymore, it's written down in the Talmud, but of course, as you know, originally it was oral, and then it was written down by Rabbi Yehuda Anasi in the year 200, also as the Mishnah, and then the Gemarrah was a commentary on that Mishnah, completed around about 500 of the Common Era. So what we are, of course, doing, I mean, you know all this, I'm just sort of pointing it out again, because this is such a classical piece of Gemarrah, really. This is how the Gemarrah works. This is the oral law written down, and it's now going to be dissected. These psukim are going to be dissected.
Johnny, can I ask you, why did it take them 300 years to comment on the Mishnah?
I think the reason was it wasn't really necessary before that, Johnny, because people, if I was to tell you something, you would remember exactly what I told you. But if you then pass that on to one of your kids, it might get a bit distorted along the way. And by the time it gets so 3 or 4 generations down, your Chinese whispers, we don't really know what I meant. I might have said a sentence to you, and then, you know, your great grandchildren will be saying, well, what the hell did Lieberman mean when he said that? And then they'd have to have a whole discussion about it, and there'd be 10 different opinions as to what I actually meant. And of course, I'm not here anymore to tell you what I meant. And that's how it goes. So by the time it came to the Gemarrah, they no longer had clarity about what the Mishnah actually meant. So that's what you see. You see that the Mishnah, we take it to the Mishnah, and the Gemarrah says, well, the Mishnah meant X. And another rabbi says, no, the Mishnah meant Y, and I'll prove it to you. And then the first rabbi says, no, your proof's rubbish. I'm going to bring you a proof that X is right. And that's how it went. And the reason they needed that was because there was a passage of 300 years, and the Chinese whisper game had happened, and nobody really knew exactly what Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who wrote it down, exactly meant. So by the time it got to 500, somebody, Rav Ashi, decided that he was, you know, we better write all this down, and so that we can have clarity. And of course, thereby we had the Talmud Babli, which was written in Babylon, present-day Iraq, and the Talmud Yerushalmi, which is difficult to understand, but it was actually written in Tiberia in the north of Israel, but it's called the Talmud. It's called Talmud Yerushalmi. So that's the reason for
Thanks.
Okay. So let's have a look at what the Gemarrah has got to say. We have basically got wrung as much as we possibly can. That's wrung with a W, as much as we can out of verse 16. And the Gemarrah now is going to move on to verse 17. Just read that verse 17 again for us, Leon, while I just get the Gemarrah up on the screen. Oh, hang on a minute. Julia wants to say something. Yes, Julia.
On verse 16, I was quite surprised that they take the word brother literally and don't extend it. Because how often is the litigation between a man and his brother, apart from when, as you suggested last time, in the case of probate, intestacies, and I mean, I was surprised that the word brother didn't mean other members of the same tribe. And that actually made me think.
It goes further than that. It means everybody. What the Gemarrah is saying is that the simple pshat, the simple understanding of this is bein ishu bein achiv. We're all brothers. If you are a Hebrew speaker and you go into any kind of shop in Israel, you will be called achi by, well, you might not because you're a woman, but a man will be called achi by the guy behind the counter, by the delivery man, my brother, achi. It's like in Manchester we say mate. Yeah, you're right, mate. All right, in here they say achi, my brother. All right, we're all brothers. So you're absolutely right. What this means on its simple level is exactly what it says. Ben ish ben achiv means everybody. What the Gemarrah was pointing out was that we can learn more than that from the verse. It doesn't. The Gemarrah wasn't saying that the probate laws that we talked about last week are the only thing that Moshe was talking about here. What the Gemarrah is saying is, yes, of course, we accept the simple pshat, the simple explanation. It means any kind of litigation between two Jews. And then Ubein Gero, and we had the explanation of that of the tanur and the kirayim and the stove and all that stuff. But those are extras. Those are sort of next level down that we're getting. Doesn't mean that the simple explanation, as you have quite rightly pointed out, doesn't apply. It's not one or the other. Yeah, you understand that? Okay. Howard, were you itching to say something there? You're muted. You're muted, Howard. You're muted. You're muted. We can't hear you.
Nothing important. I was going to say people usually say Adoni, which is very impressive. You don't get that in the UK. But I don't know whether I'm anticipating what's coming next. But Vatikru, Lotikiru, Panim is fascinating. Are you about to discuss it? And I won't preempt it. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, so we've done verse 16. I think we've done verse 16 justice. Just read us verse 17 again, Leon, while I just get the Gemarrah up on the screen.
You shall not show favoritism in judgment. Small and great alike shall you hear. You shall not tremble before any man, for the judgment is God's. Any matter that is too difficult for you, you shall bring to me, and I shall hear it.
Right. Okay. So we need to get to page, what do you say was 40, Johnny? Yes, there we go. There we go. There, can you see the screen? Yeah, okay. So this is where we got to last time. We spoke about this Ben Gero, meaning the if there was an inheritance issue between a stove and an oven, and I showed you pictures of those Talmudic ovens and stoves. Okay, so now we are going to go into the next verse, which Leon just read out for us. Lo takiru panim bamishpat. Do not something, panim, faces, bamishpat. What does takir panim mean? So what I would like you to tell me, this excludes David Marks until everybody else has had a go, because I know that he knows the answer to this. Where do we see this word, lo takiru or takiru, or the concept of being makir panim? Where do we see that? Where have we got that word in the Torah?
Does it mean recognize, Johnny?
It does mean recognize. Excellent, Johnny. That's a very good start.
Yeah.
It means to recognize. So in modern Hebrew, we would say, Ani makir otcha, I know you. By the way, if somebody says to you, if you want to say to somebody, do you know so-and-so? In English, you would say, do you know him? In Hebrew, if you say that, it means something completely different. You mustn't say to somebody, Ani yodea ota, I know her, because that means something completely, that means know in the biblical sense, okay? To quote Woody Allen from Annie Hall, so if you want to say, I know him, so I would say, Ani makir et Johnny Halpin. In English, I recognize, or it's not really, you can't really translate it. You translate it as, I know Johnny Halpin, but you don't use the word Ani Yodea, because that has...
You don't use the et either with a proper name.
Sorry? I
suggest you don't use et either with a proper name.
Why not?
Because it's a name. You don't need the et with a name.
I bow to your superior knowledge
I'm
on
not
that.
I'm not a great linguist at all, but I think it's not right. But may I say this, the use of panim is infinitely more interesting, the two together.
Okay, we're coming to it. We're coming to it.
We're coming, okay.
Yes, Leon.
It's the same.
Would it be when Hashem pushed Moses into the cleft of the rock so that he doesn't see him?
I don't think so.
No.
I think that is, he is samti. He places him, and no man is able to lirot et panai, to see my face. Could be wrong, David. I don't think lahakir is in there, is it? No. Any other offers, Julia? You were going to say something, Julia.
I was going to say something, but actually it was to do with the word knowing, because in French you have the same thing as you do in Ivrit with je sais and je connais.
Right.
To know a person,
So which is the one I need to avoid?
Well, sais, to know something is what is knowledge, of, and connaître is to be familiar with a person, to recognize a person.
Right, interesting. Okay, and does if you say je sais about a person, does it have the same connotation as it does in Hebrew?
I'd have to ask my son-in-law.
Okay, fine. Well, there you are. You can let us know. I don't want to make any faux pas in French. If I go and speak to our Frenchies in shul, I don't want to make any faux pas. Okay, so any other offers before David Marks tells us where we see this this word lahakir? Any other offers? Okay, David, where is it?
Twice in the same parasha, in Vayeshev, with Yehuda and Tamar, Vayaker Yehuda, Vayomer Tzadka Mimeni.
Okay.
And also with Yaakov recognizing the coat of Yosef, Vayakirah, Vayomer Ketonet B'ni.
Okay, yes, lahakir means to recognize. There absolutely means to recognize. Now I want you to tell me where we see lahakir in the same the same meaning as we've got in this Gemara. And it's in. I'll give you a clue. It's in Kitetse.
Oh, okay. Go on. Fire, Johnny.
Okay, I've got him, everyone. I've got him.
Yeah.
Here it is on the screen. Kitiena le'ishtei nashim. If a person has two wives, let me just find you again. I've lost you. There you go. Kitiena le'ishtei nashim. Ha'achat ahuva v'achat snua. So he's got a loved wife and a hated wife. He's got children from both of them. The hated wife's child is the firstborn. And it will be when he comes to bequeath his inheritance to his children. You cannot take precedent. Levaker, you cannot take precedence. That's from the word to choose. Bechor, you cannot make the loved wife's child the firstborn over that of the hated wife. And here it comes. Ki et habechor ben hasnua yakir. Okay, that's our word, yakir. The son of the hated one, yakir, you must, and he translates it here as acknowledge. What have you got, Leon, in that, please? It's chapter 21 of Devarim, and it is verse 17.
Rather, he must recognize the firstborn, the son of the hated one, to give him the double portion.
He uses the word recognize. He uses the word acknowledge. But why have I shown you this, and why am I taking so long over it? Is because this is the context of our Gemara and our pasuk in Devarim. Because here in this instance, what you've got to do is you've got to favor. You actually favor the firstborn, because, as you know, in Jewish law, the firstborn inherits a double portion. So what he's trying to do here is trying to give the double portion to his favorite wife's child, just like Yaakov did to Yosef. This is a warning by the Torah in Parashat Kitetse not to do what Yaakov did. Yaakov did exactly what we're told not to do. Now, of course, he wasn't told not to do it, so it was okay for him to do it. But we are now told not to do that. You are not allowed to override the true firstborn. You have to acknowledge, you have to recognize that the true firstborn, and he gets the favorite portion, right? He gets the double portion. Now, if we go back to our verse, to our pasuk here, which is verse 17, lo takiru panim bamishpat. Do not acknowledge or do not recognize panim, faces. Okay, do not recognize faces bamishpat. In other words, and he translates it nicely here on my page here, you shall not favor persons in judgment. So 1 second, Howard, you can come to panim in a sec. Leon, what have you got there? Say it again for us. You shall not what?
Show favoritism.
Show favoritism. So it's the same word. You can see that in the hated wife's child's case, the firstborn case, you're showing favoritism. That's what Yaakov did with Yosef, and we all know what that led to. That led to his brothers hating him. That led to his brothers throwing him in a pit, his brothers selling him down to Egypt, and 210 years of slavery. So the Torah is very clear that that's not a good thing to do, but it means showing favoritism. And that's why I went back to that particular pasuk in Kitetse to demonstrate the meaning here of our verse. Lo takiru panim bamishpat. Now, Howard, what do you want to say about panim?
Well, recognize faces takes you straight to justice is blind. It's amazing.
Okay, go on.
Justice is blind. And I believe, although I can't find it, that the statue on the Old Bailey, the Central Criminal Court, I think she's blindfolded.
Right.
But in any event, it's a basic tenet of English law that justice is blind. You don't look at the personality, you consider the law, and I think it's really fascinating.
Okay, now
straight from the Tanakh to present day English law.
Hold that thought, because you're going to be amazed at the Gemarrah that we're about to learn now. Okay, so let's go back to the Gemarrah. That's the pasuk. That's the bit of the pasuk that we're starting with now. Lo takiru panim bamishpat. Do not recognize. Literally, let's translate it literally first. Do not recognize faces when you give out justice. Okay, we have paraphrased it into "you shall not favor people in judgment." From the explanation that I've given you from Parshat Kitetse, but literally, as Howard points out, it means do not recognize faces. Hold that, and let's go back to the Gemarrah. Let me find the Gemarrah again. On the screen. Right, there we go. You should have the right. Here we go. Lo takiru panim bamishpat. Let's have a look what Rabbi Yehuda says. Very interesting. Rabbi Yehuda says, do not recognize him. It comes from the word takirehu. So, as we've just said, do not acknowledge the litigant as a friend in your role as a judge. Lo takiru panim. So if somebody says to me in Hebrew, do you know that person over there? Do you know Johnny Halpern? And I will say, yes, ani makir oto, which means I recognize his face. I know him, right? I'm recognizing him. As we know, as from what we've just said, it means to show favoritism, as with the firstborn. So Rabbi Yehuda takes our explanation, or I should say, I have taken Rabbi Yehuda's explanation to show you first. He goes along with that. Lo takirehu. Do not acknowledge him. Do not makir panim. Do not recognize his face. And you'll see in a story that we're going to come to in a minute exactly what they're talking about. And in fact, you will notice that justice is a little bit blind anyway. So this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. He likes our explanation of lo takiru panim, and he links that in the same way to the recognition that the firstborn child gets. Yakir et ben hasnua. Rabbi Elazar, on the other hand, he takes a different explanation. And his explanation is a little bit more tenuous, really, in terms of the language. Rabbi Elazar says the opposite. Rabbi Yehuda says, don't show favoritism to somebody that you know. Rabbi Elazar says, Lo te nakrehu. Translated over here, even if he is your opponent, do not estrange him in such a way as to prejudge him as liable, but treat him as though you do not know him at all. So he takes the other end of the spectrum. Rabbi Yehuda says, don't show favoritism to somebody you know and you like. And Rabbi Elazar says the opposite. Don't judge somebody overly harshly because you know him and you don't like him. Okay, and how does he get to that? He uses the same technique that we have seen in previous weeks of a play on words. I think it's a bit more tenuous, this play on words, to be honest, but this is his play on words. He says, Lo te nakrehu, which sounds a bit like lo takiru, but it's got a nun in the middle there. Lo te nakrehu. You can see that there's a taf, there's a kaf, and there's a resh, but he's snuck a little nun in there. Now, what word can you see in the middle of that word that you are familiar with? Lo te nakrehu. Okay. Any offers? All right.
Well,
Jeffrey.
The root is nakar.
Go on, Leon.
Well, I don't know what it means, nakar.
Okay. Jeffrey, could you please hold up that page of the Siddur that you got ready for me to the camera? Everybody put Jeffrey on your view. Go to view and see if you can put Jeffrey on your view. I will tell you what it says if you can't read it, if it's too small. Jeffrey, if you speak to us, Jeffrey, at the same time, we should be able to get you big on the screen if we put you on speaker view. Jeffrey, speak to us.
Okay. Yeah.
There we go.
Can you see it now?
That? The second bracha. Baruch atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam shelo asani nochri. Nun, kaf, resh, yud. Now, most of you who don't use the Singer's Prayer Book will not say that. Most of you will say shelo asani goy. But I happen to remember that thank you, Jeffrey. I happen to remember that the Singer's Prayer Book used the word nochri. The Rinat Yisrael uses the word goy, and if I'm not mistaken, the Art Scroll Siddur, I've got an Art Scroll in front of me, I've got an Art Scroll Siddur, let's see what they say.
It doesn't say it, I don't think.
They say goy as well. But the Singer's Prayer Book, which is based on the German minhag, the minhag of the Yekkers, says nochri. Instead of shelo asani goy, lo asani nochri. Now, what is a nochri? A nochri, obviously, is a goy, because they're interchangeable, aren't they? So a nochri means a non-Jewish person in this regard, in that bracha. It means we're thanking God for not making us a non-Jewish person. But the word nochri means stranger, estranged. Now, we had it in last week's Sedra. Who can show me or tell me where we had this word in last week's Sedra? Last week's Sedra was the Sedra of Yitro. Let me, whilst you are thinking about that, let me find it for you. I've got it ready in Parashat Yitro. And I'm ready to share the screen when anybody has a guess. Where did we see this word last week's Sedra? Who was listening to the laning last week carefully, apart from the 10 Commandments? Jeffrey was listening carefully. Hey, Jeffrey, where is it?
I can't remember. I can't remember. It's done so quickly, I struggle to follow.
I was laning last week, Jeffrey. I lane very
Not all
slowly.
the time.
I lane very slowly. Marcel, go on.
No, that's in Mishpatim also. I've just found it in Mishpatim. Wait a minute. You want it in Yitro. It's in Mishpatim as well, in Chet.
Okay, we'll come to Mishpatim in a sec. David Marks, where is it in Yitro? David?
Elohei Necha.
Could be. Wasn't what I was thinking of. You'll kick yourself when I tell you. Here we go. Have a look on my screen. Okay. Vayikach Yitro choten Moshe et Tzipora eshet Moshe acha shilucheha. Moshe's father-in-law took Tzipora and his two children. V'et shnei banea asher shema echad Gershom. One of them was called Gershom, with the word Ger in it. Why was he called Gershom? Ki Amar, because he said, Ger Hayiti, I was a stranger, Be'eretz Nochriya. There we have in that pasuk both the word Goy, well, we haven't got the word Goy, we've got the word Ger, and we've got the word Nochri. So there you are in Parashat Yitro, there, right at the beginning, the name of Gershom was called a stranger because Moshe was a or in that scenario is a foreigner. So where we go back to the Gemarrah, which is over here, try and find it back on the screen quickly. Rabbi, what's his name? Rabbi Elazar says to Nakrehu, do not make him estranged. Do not treat him like a foreigner. Don't push him aside. Don't make him as somebody who's a stranger, who's not in part of your team, if you like. Why? Because you know him and you don't like him. So, you've got two ends of the spectrum here. Lo takiru panim b'mishpat. The simple explanation is don't show anybody favoritism. But the two rabbis here are two extremes of a spectrum, and in some ways, what the Gemarrah is saying is either way, don't favor anybody. Don't favor somebody and don't unfavor somebody in judgment. You have to treat everybody as if you don't know them. Justice is blind. Lo takiru panim. Do not recognize faces. So that is, I thought that was really interesting that from that word takiru, Rabbi Yehuda uses the obvious explanation, and Rabbi Elazar wants to bring something extra and uses a bit of semantic acrobatics, really, and sticks a nun in there and makes it nochri, like the Singer's Prayer Book says in the morning, and like we said in last week's Sedra. Elohei Nechar is also in there as well, so of course David was right on that, but he may know his Tanakh, but he can't read my mind yet, so he didn't know which bit of Tanakh I was referring to. David, you need to bone up on your mind reading skills.
Okay.
Johnny?
Yes, Morris?
Johnny, would, in those days, would people, judges, recuse themselves if they knew somebody from a, if they needed to make a judgment on something? Would they recuse themselves?
Let's see what the Gemarrah says, because that's the very next piece of Gemarrah we're coming to. So your question will be answered right now by the Gemarrah. Let's carry on. Ush pizchanei derav ata lekamei ledina. Look at that lovely word there. Ush pizchanei. I know that this is not a Hebrew language shiur. It's meant to be a Gemarrah shiur, but it's just we can learn so much from the language. Where do you know this word from? You must know this word.
Ushpizin.
Ushpizin, yes. Ushpizin. Where do we see the ushpizin? In our sukkah. And what are the ushpizin that come to
we welcome our guests to the
They are guests, that's right. In modern Hebrew, where do you see this word? Anybody know? Anybody know where you see this word in modern Hebrew?
I knew it was guests.
David?
It's in a hospital, isn't it?
Yes, it is. If you are what we would call in English an inpatient, if you are an inpatient in hospital, then you are meushpaz. You are admitted. You are in fact a guest in their hospital. So yes, that is ushbaz in modern Hebrew in relation to hospitals means an inpatient. That's absolutely right. You will hear that say if somebody says somebody is ill, you'll then hear them. If you want you to say, are they in hospital? You'll hear them say, has he been admitted to hospital? Is he in hospital? We would say, is he in hospital? And we would understand that meant, is he an inpatient in hospital? But that's how you say it in modern Hebrew. So this is the same word as the ushpizin for Sukkot. It's the same word as the modern Hebrew word for being an inpatient. And what it means here is, of course, if you are a guest, then if you have a guest, then there must also be a host, right? The host hosts the guest. The guest is a guest of the host. So this is the other side of the coin of this word, ushpizchanei de Rav, a host of Rav, ata lakamei ledina. In other words, as it says here in the Steinsaltz translation, for those of you who've got it there, Julia, it's your brand new Gemarrah, it's there in front of you, with whom he would stay occasionally. So this guy who came before him for a judgment was somebody who had hosted Rav in the past. Let's have a look at that little L. That little L takes us somewhere there, language. There we go. Now, what you didn't know, I'm sure, I certainly didn't, was that the word ushpiza that we use for ushpizin for Sukkot and for the hospital is not a Hebrew word. Well, we probably did know it wasn't a Hebrew word because it just doesn't sound like a Hebrew word. It's from the Middle Persian, whatever that says, aspinj, meaning a hotel or hospitality. The ending corresponds to the Persian suffix ag, signifying agency or one who carries out an action. Here, the action of hospitality, therefore, the term means a host. So there, Rav Steinsaltz has explained how we get to that word ushpizchanei, meaning a host, from the Middle Persian. So that's interesting. So that word will have crept in to the Jewish lexicon at the time, probably, of the Purim story. There's a connection to the time of year because, of course, the Purim story took place in the time of Paras Umadai, Persia and Media, when the Jews were under the rule of Achashverosh, who was the king of Persia and Media and 127 states, as we know. So this word probably crept into our lexicon at the time of the Purim story, which would be around about 500 before the Common Era, 1,000 years before the Gemarrah was written. So by the time the Gemarrah was written, this word ushpizchine is already well established, probably in the Jewish language. It's not a Hebrew word, it's imported. By the way, Mordechai is also not a Hebrew name, it's a Persian name. Esther is a Persian name. So any of you who have the name Mordechai or Esther, or any of your relatives have that name, they don't have Hebrew names, they have Persian names. We know, of course, Esther was Hadassah. We're told that very clearly, but we're not told what Mordechai's real name was, but his Persian name was Mordechai. So there we have a precedent, by the way, for us having a Hebrew name, a Shem Kodesh, and a Shem Loazi, the secular name. For example, my secular name is Jonathan, but my Hebrew name is Yaakov Tzvi Hirsch. So Mordechai will have had a Jewish name. We're not told what it is, but that's what he would have had, a Jewish name, probably. But Mordechai is a Persian name. Just throw that in as a bit of an extra. Okay, let's get back to the Gemarrah. So this fellow who has hosted Rav in the past comes before him for a judgment. Amalo, Rav said to this fellow, Lav ushpizchani at ? Question mark. Are you not my host? Don't I know you? Haven't I stayed at your house? Amar lo. And this when I first started learning Gemarrah, this absolutely threw me. Amar lo, he said, in. Now, what does ein mean in modern Hebrew?
Not.
Not or no. And what does in mean in Talmudic Hebrew?
Yes.
Yes, it means completely the opposite. Now, that when I first started learning Gemarrah, I just could not get my head around that at all. But you just have to accept it. In means yes. Okay, it's Aramaic and it means yes. I don't know why. If anybody can explain to me why in means yes and not no, I'd be very happy to hear it. I've spent more years than I can. I'd like to think about thinking and wondering why that's the case, but it is. So he said, yes, I am. And therefore, he said to him, Dina itli. I've got a judgment that I need sorting out. I've got a din Torah I've got a dispute I need to sort out. Amalei. So Rav said to him, I'll hold you in suspense, those of you that haven't got the Gemarrah in front of you, because it's on the next page. What did Rav say to him, do you think? Those of you who haven't got a Gemarrah in front of him, what do you think Rav said to this fellow?
Disqualified from...
Yeah, he says, I can't do it. There we go. On to the next page. We're now on Daf Chet. We've progressed, everyone. We're on the next page. That's what he says. Psilna lach ledina. Psilna lach ledina. What word can you see there in psilna?
Postle.
Postle or postle, as we used to say. What is postle?
Postle.
What does it mean, postle?
Cancelled.
Not allowed.
Yeah, it's no good. If your etrog is pasol, you can't use it. It's no good for the mitzvah because your pitum's fallen off. If your tzitzit are pasol, it means all the strings have come off and you've got them caught in your bicycle chain or something, and they've all been pulled off. Pasol. A Sefer Torah, if it's got a letter missing, is pasol. It's disqualified. It's the same word. Psilna lach ledina. I am disqualified to judge for you. Okay. Now, this is really interesting. Let's have a look over here in our little H. So on the screen, you can see it. Those of you who've got in the book, you're on page 41, I think now. Yeah. I am disqualified to judge for you. Rav Steinsaltz says, a person may not act as a judge for someone who he loves or hates. Rather, the litigants must be equal in the eyes and hearts of the judge. If the judge does not know the litigants or their activities at all, there is no judge as just as he is. Or in other words, Howard, justice is blind. Exactly. So, you want to know where justice is blind comes from? Here you are. The Gemarrah tells us very clearly, if the plaintiff sends a gift to the judge before summoning the defendant to trial, this does not disqualify the judge. Nevertheless, if the judge notices that he's predisposed to favor one side, he may refrain from judgment in this case as an act of piety. Now,
with respect, it comes from Devarim.
Yes, exactly. Our Gemarrah is explaining the verse in Devarim, Lo takiru panim, in exactly this way. Our Gemarrah is looking at those words, Lo takiru panim, and is saying, yes, justice is blind. Exactly that. Rav, here, now there is an opinion, by the way, that Rav did not need to do that actually he was not disqualified from judging, only he felt that he should disqualify himself because he might fall into the trap of favoring this fellow because he had hosted him in his house. So there's a machloket between the rabbis as to whether the halacha is that in this case that Rav had to exclude himself, or whether this was an act of piety of Rav and that he was going beyond that which was strictly necessary. I am going to go with the first one because I like the idea that the concept of justice is blind is a halakhic concept rather than a concept of piety. But there is that machloket ha-deyot that you should know about. Okay, so what did he do about it? So what did Rav say? Rav said, I can't do this. Now, this is where we're going to see something which it takes a little bit of discussion, and I'm interested to hear your opinions. Julia knows where I'm going with this because she's read on, and I can see on her face that she's also not happy entirely with what's coming up. So let's have a look. Rav, then, Amar le Rav, le Rav Kahana. Rav, who has disqualified himself, then says to Rav Kahana, who is his colleague, Puk dainei. Puk dainei. Puk means to go out. Dainei, you go and judge the case. I can't take this case. You go and judge this case. Presumably because Rav Kahana had not been a guest of this particular man. Because if he had, then there'd be no point Rav telling Kahana to go and do it. So Rav Kahana is not disqualified. And he says, you go and do it. Chazye dahavaka gaes ba. He saw chazye. That's from the same word as we have a Hebrew word. I haven't got it ready because I've only just thought of it. We have it in a very famous haftorah. That word, the root of that word chazye. He saw chazye. He saw. Rav Kahana saw. Anyone know what I'm referring to? A very famous haftorah. David?
Chazon Yeshayahu v'Ramot.
Yeah, there, he's back on form. Chazon Yeshayahu, yes, the vision of Isaiah, the great vision of Isaiah. Chazon is it means a vision. You may have heard of a very famous rabbi, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in the 18th century, maybe 17th.
Chazon Ish.
Sorry, Johnny?
Chazon Ish.
Chazon Ish, yes, he was in the 20th century. You're right, Chazon Ish, the same word, Chazon, a man of great vision. That wasn't the one I was thinking of. I was thinking of the Chozeh mi Lublin, the seer of Lublin, I think in the 18th or 17th century, not sure. But the seer of Lublin, he was called. He was a man of great vision. So Chazye is from that word, Chazye. He saw, Rav Kahana saw, Dahavaka Gaes Bey. He was acting in a haughty manner. Gaes means haughty. He was acting. This guy was very cocksure of himself. That's an I don't know if that's a northern expression for you non-northerners, but this guy really fancied himself. He was acting in a very haughty way. Why was he acting in a haughty way? Because he was a mate of Rav's. He had hosted Rav, and he felt himself in a very strong position because he thought Rav is going to look after him in this judgment. But Rav has declined to take on the case, and he's told Rav Kahana to go and do it. Rav Kahana sees that the guy's a bit arrogant. Amalei, he says to him, "I tzaita, if you will listen to me, then listen to me. V'ila, and if not, if you're not prepared to listen to me, mapikna lach Rav me'unach," which is translated here, I will take out Rav from your ears. And Rav Steinsaltz gives us a translation with which I'm uncomfortable. I will treat you harshly, and you will understand that your relationship with Rav will not help you at all. Now, if we go back to the previous page and we have a look at what Reb Elazar said, Rabbi Elazar Omer, lo tenakrehu. Do not estrange somebody to prejudge him as liable, but treat him as though you do not know him at all. So Rabbi Elazar is saying that our verse, lo takiru panim b'mishpat, you remember we said that applies to somebody you don't like, who's not behaving nicely. You've still got to treat him exactly as you would somebody else. Well, Rav Kahana on page 8 here is not doing that, is he? He doesn't like the way this guy's behaving. He's not heard any evidence yet, and he's threatening him. He's saying, you better listen to me, because if you don't, I'm going to treat you very harshly, and that relationship with Rav will not help you at all. I'm very uncomfortable with that translation or that explanation of Rav Steinsaltz, because I think it goes against the Rabbi Lazar's explanation of lo takiru panim over here. So I'm interested to know your thoughts on that. Leon.
There's an extraordinary addition to the translation in the Art Scroll. He translates Mapikna lach Rav me'unach. I will remove Rav from your strength. And then it's added, by excommunicating you, and even Rav will not be able to help you.
Yeah, that's even stronger, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's even stronger. Rav Kahana is giving this guy a proper telling off before we've even started. It's interesting, the footnote there, Leon. Read out the footnote in number 2, the footnote 2 there.
Yes.
This is quoting Rashi. Sorry?
Steinsaltz mentions it on the right-hand side in notes about...
Yeah, we're coming to that in a sec.
Oh, okay.
Go on, Leon. Read note 2.
Confident that Rav would help him, he spoke in a haughty and assured manner, according to Rashi.
Yeah. So have a look at over here in the notes. And that is, I will take Rav out of your ears. According to one version of Rashi's commentary, Rashi reads the phrase as out of your power and not out of your ears. The message is therefore, I will prevent Rav from helping you. Other sources indicate that the term means that Rav's name will no longer be in the host's ears, as the host will forget him completely, since in any case, it will not be of any help to him. But in any event, it seems to me that this is Rav Kahana is not acting in accordance with Reb Elazar's explanation of our pasuk of lo takiru panim. So I'm a bit uncomfortable with Rav Kahana's behavior here. Rav Kahana should not be having a go at him and treating him harshly before he's heard the evidence. Julia, what do you think of that?
I was wondering that the 4 words are mapikna lach Rav me'unach. Does it actually say, I mean, it's not so bad if it says you will understand that your relationship with Rav will not help you at all, because that's fair, that's equitable, you know, it's not unreasonable. It's that I will treat you harshly bit. And is that actually specified in those 4 words?
Well, those 4 words mean mapikna. It's the same word as puk above, 2 lines above there, puk daina. Go out and judge it. Mapikna lach, I will take out for you. Rav, I will take Rav out for you. Me unach, from your ears.
Well, it just seems to me it's not there. I will treat you harshly is not specifically there.
Okay, brilliant. So Julia's interpretation of mapikna lach Rav meunach is a gentle reminder to this fellow. Please understand that your relationship with Rav is not going to help you now. So we're going to start this court case now, and I'm going to be completely impartial. And the fact that you have a relationship with Rav is not going to help you. And I'm going to take Rav out of your ears completely. He's out of the picture now. Now, that's great. I wonder why then Rashi, and based on Rashi, all the other Meforshim here, the Steinsaltz and the Art Scroll in the modern time, take on that idea that this was a harsh thing, going as far as Leon just read out in the Art Scroll. I'll excommunicate you. I'll put you in Cherem. You know, that doesn't get any harsher than that. It's. I wonder why Rashi takes that on. I have to say, Julia, once again for the second week running, I am very much in favour of the Julia Pshat, the Chidushe Posner. They're coming along very nicely. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I would like that to say the meaning that you say, because then I'm not conflicted with Rav Kahana's behavior against Rebbe Elazar's statement. Anybody else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that Rav Kahana, he says to him, if not, is he asking the defendant whether or not he's going to allow him to take this case? I mean, is he giving him an option before he does it? Or is he just saying this wildly and doesn't have any purpose in saying it? He's saying to him, if not, so the guy has a right to say to the judge, I don't feel comfortable with you. I'd like to get another judge. That's what it sounds like. And if not, I will take Rav out of your ears. Well, why would anybody want to go before a judge who says that to him?
That's my point. Unless what the judge is saying is what Julius says, which is a gentle reminder that this is an impartial court.
Yeah, but that's not impartial to say that.
Well, this is my point. This is exactly my point, Nachum. As it stands in the Rashi, and as it stands in the Steinsaltz, and certainly as it stands in the Art Scroll, Rav Kahana is anything but impartial. He's really obviously taken a dislike to this fellow's behavior.
Right, and he says it.
That's exactly the point that I'm making.
He says this consciously. Well, does he have an option? Is he giving this man an option to say, I don't want you to be my judge? I mean, it must be.
Personally, I think it's a rhetorical question. I don't think he does have a choice. But we do know from previous weeks, don't we, that the litigants can opt out of cases if they don't feel comfortable with the judge before they start. So I suppose there's always got that default position. We've learned that in previous weeks. Okay.
Were these two guys? Were Rav and Rav Kahana alive at the same time?
Well, one assumes so, because it seems to me that it's a good question. But I mean, on the face of it, he's actually had a conversation with him. Rav has told Rav Kahana, I can't do this case, you go and do it. So on that basis, it would seem so. But it might not be such a daft question, because we do know that there is some poetic license used in various places. For example, if you go and look in the Machzor of Yom Kippur, and you look at the Asara Haruge Malchut, the 10 martyrs who we read about, how they were all killed one after the other. Well, some of them didn't live contemporaneously to one another. So there's quite a bit of poetic license there in that. This may be the same, I don't know. On the face of it, they lived in the same place at the same time and were in the same base din on the face of this Gemarrah. But it's a good question. Maybe I'll see if we can find any historical background on them to make that any different. But on the face of it, they were colleagues in the same court.
Where is this actually located? Is this in Babylon when this is all taking place, the whole Sanhedrin? Is this written during the time that we were in Babylon?
No, this was written in the time when we were already exiled after the Roman exile. We were all over the place by now. This was written in Bavel. This is the Talmud Bavli, So this was written in Babel, in Babylon, Iraq. Whether it was necessarily took place in Babylon, I don't know. I would have to have a look and see. It's a follow-on from Michael's question, really. Were Rav and Rav Kahana contemporaries? And if so, where were they contemporaries? I don't know. I'll have to look it up.
Also, this seems to be, this was written then, if we know the history, it was written after the kings. So a lot of this information could have been based on what they had experienced as being under the destructive behavior of kings, and maybe it had some effect on what was being done now in this time after kings. Is that a possibility?
It's certainly. I mean, history is a rolling item, isn't it? You build on history, and if you have a period of bad kings, then that's going to filter down for sure. So without a doubt, when this is being talked about, it's well past the era of the kings. It's in the era. It's in the era after the destruction of the Second Temple. So we're well past kings. We're well past prophets, and as you probably know, most of the time during the Second Temple era, the level of corruption and lack of justice and lack of social justice, for sure, we've spoken about it many times, was dreadful. It was a pretty, we on Tisha B'Av, we all sit and we rend our clothes and we read Kinot, and we want the good old days of the time of the Beit HaMikdash. Well, most of the days of the second Beit HaMikdash were not good old days at all. They were terrible. The Kohen Gadol was corrupt. The leader was corrupt. The kings were corrupt. The rabbis were corrupt. You may say plus ça change, but it wasn't a great time. It wasn't a great time. But what the Gemarrah is trying to do here is to go back to the sources of the Torah, which is our verses in Dvarim in this particular case, and tell us how it should be done. How it was done is not always how it should be done. And when we know that from our own lives, don't we? Things that are done are not always done in the way we'd like them to be done.
So at the time, the kings were not disciplined at all by the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin should have been doing the very same things it's telling us now to the kings, because the kings are no better than anybody. They're still simple human beings that should be under the same behavior.
It's a good theory, Nahum.
You're right. When we get in the Tanakh shir, when we get to the book of the second book of Samuel and the books of Kings, we will see exactly how the vast majority of kings in Israel were of a very low standard. The, if you like, good kings were few and far between.
Where was the Sanhedrin? Why weren't they functioning in this capacity?
Because we had bad kings that didn't allow them to. Remember, the kings were despots. They weren't democratically elected. They behaved in a very harsh manner, and they were dictators. They were dictators.
So there's all of the Talmud was trashed then at the time when the kings were operating.
When the bad kings were operating, then the Torah's laws were not upheld. That is true. Yes.
Yes. Jonathan.
Yes, Stanley.
I have a Briggs dictionary. It's a Hebrew dictionary, English Hebrew dictionary on a Bible. And it's interesting, written about the in.
Go on.
Okay, because it's the in yesh, it's complete sentence of Aramaic for aim. But the in yesh, like two words.
Okay, which means?
Which means aim.
No. So how does it mean yes?
but because it's without yesh, I think. It's like
Okay.
a
Well, so far, Stanley, you haven't managed to satisfy my 50-year-old trouble with this word. But
it's what Rick's saying.
take a photograph of that page and send it to me, please, so I can study it. Okay. All right. It's time's up, I'm afraid. I hope that that was interesting. I certainly found it interesting. We will carry on hopefully next week at the usual time of 10:15. And until then, Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov, Johnny. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
Rabbi.